Welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast, proudly presented by Venture Hunting and Outdoors. If you're like us and passionate about hunting, spearfishing, and many other outdoor-related pursuits, with an eagerness to fast-track your learning, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome back, legends, to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast. You are listening to your host, James Doumtsis, and today we are going to be answering probably one of our most frequently asked questions, and that is breaking down the costs of our big US trip. So this is very relevant for us as we are heading out in a week. When you're actually listening to this, we will be most likely on a plane or just got to the US. And so we've written down all the expenses that we've incurred in planning this trip, getting the tags, all the applications and fees, flights, cars, rental cars, everything like that, just to give you guys a ballpark idea of what it costs to go on a trip like this, and hopefully, help you guys and inspire you guys to start saving up and get a bit of a budget for yourself to go and experience one of the incredible sights and sounds that you get to experience in the US. So as well as that, we will be answering a listener FAQ question as we do regularly on the podcast. So if you guys have a FAQ that you'd like answered on the podcast, please send that to either Aidan Doumtsis Outdoors, James Doumtsis Outdoors, or the Twin Elements Instagram account, or you can send us an email at info@twinelements.com.au with the subject line FAQ, and we'll answer it on there. So without further ado, we'll jump into this podcast. The Hunting Australia Facebook group is now a club that you can join. Members get access to discount codes from leading businesses, you can acquire your New South Wales R licence membership, and every month they run incredible giveaways with thousands of dollars worth of top tier gear, but also give away guided hunts as well. So if you want to learn from the best or go in the running to win some incredible gear or maybe a hunt of a lifetime, or just want to be part of the greater hunting community, make sure to join the Hunting Australia group. Use code TWINELEMENTS to get 10% off your membership. Now, as you guys may be fully aware, it's very different over in the US to it is here in Australia and also in New Zealand, where we can just go and hunt whenever we want, whatever we want, essentially, as long as we've mainly got private land access or, maybe dock land in New Zealand. But over in the US, you always need a tag. So I'm sure you guys have listened to our previous episodes that we did with Hunt and Full with Austin Atkinson's, where we broke down all the application strategies and by each species as well. So we had an elk one, a deer one, which was mule deer and whitetail. We then had antelope, and plus we did a couple of bonus episodes, bit higher end tags with caribou, moose, and all the sheep, so mountain goat as well in there. And hopefully you guys understand that, to be able to go and hunt in the US, what you need is a tag. So whether that tag's over the counter where you've just purchased it, over the counter essentially, or whether it's a more general unit or it's a limited entry, which is a bit harder. Hopefully you understand all this terminology that I'm using. You need a tag to go and hunt over there. And so what I've done firstly is, I guess I've called it to be in the running for even going over there and doing a hunt like this, is you need to do some, prior planning, preparation, and some prior applications. So with that, I've got a budget here, which I've said $500 to $1,500, depending on the species you want to hunt. I and Aidan now spend a little bit more than this every year, but we are also applying in, I think, about 9 states currently. And that's a lot of them just accumulating points, not anticipating that we're going to hunt this year. This year we're only hunting in Montana, but applying in a lot of states to try and, cover our bases in that lottery system and get as many opportunities and tags as possible. And also whilst planning to go and hunt in some of these states in 5 and 10 years' time. So I encourage you to reach out and get in contact with Hunt and Full and, take advantage of their services over there. And what they're going to help you do is essentially help with your applying strategy. It's a very foreign and alien system over there. But what they're going to do is help you to apply in exactly, and set up your hunt strategy for you. So for most people, I've said, you're going to need about $500 to $1,500 per year in applying, and that's mainly just going to cover you in a couple of states. You might get some points, you might get some preference points and stuff like that, and it might be a 1 to 5 year plan, and going over and trying to do a hunt. This podcast is mainly for sort of a more DIY sort of hunt. Obviously, if you're just going to buy a tag and go over there fully guided and stuff like that, this hunt is probably not, or this plan and budget is probably going to be a bit more expensive. So yeah, if you're looking at just buying a hunt and be guided for maybe a 30, 40 or 50th birthday or 60th birthday present, or a big, life event or quarter life crisis or half midlife crisis, then yeah, this budget may blow out a little bit. But this is more for that DIY person, whether it be bow or rifle, and more probably not necessarily a backpack hunt, but more probably living out of a car / tent, moving around. If you plan on staying in motels and stuff every night and that type of thing, and eating out a lot, then obviously this budget is going to get blown out as well. So going back to the application, so it works out roughly that it's sort of $200 to $300 a year, and I should say all these are in Australian prices. So New Zealand, there's going to be a little bit of conversion. Obviously, if you're a US listener to this podcast, you're going to have the benefit of paying in US dollars, so it's going to be fairly cheaper for you, also on flights as well. But a yearly application fee for most states works out to be about $200 to $300 Australian a year. Plus, then on top of that, you've got a per species fee. So for most people that just want to hunt, like just say an elk or a mule deer or maybe an antelope, you're probably going to be looking at $200 to $300 for the fee plus roughly $20 per species. This does vary obviously between state. State to state, we're going to be giving like rough ballpark figures here because I don't want to list every single fee for every single state. If you do use Hunting Fool, which we do encourage, it works out to be roughly about $100 Australian on top of that, and so that's obviously going to be included in your consultancy. That includes all the consultancy fees and everything like that. Like that's just their fees for managing, essentially making sure that all the payments and everything go perfectly off your card and all your applications go perfectly, as well as all their hunt advisory and consultancy as well. So, and that is a per state fee as well. So after talking to them, or whether you do your own research and stuff like that, it really does depend. So places like Montana, you might only need to apply for 1 or 2 years, and then you can go and get a general tag. There's over-the-counter tags in like Utah. Idaho's going next year to a draw, which, pretty good odds. Colorado as well, pretty good odds. Whereas Wyoming, where I'm looking to go and hunt elk next year, I've been applying for like 6 years. So, it just depends on when you plan on going. It depends on, really how much you have to spend, and is this going to be a trip where you'd like to go every second or third year, or is it a trip where you'd like to go every 5 years, or is it a trip where you want to do it once? And that's where talking to Hunting Fool really pays dividends, because they can, really sort of sort it out for you, exactly what you're aiming to do, and then obviously do that in the most successful draw way, and application strategy way, but also most cost-effective way. So the only exception I should say is New Mexico. So they don't have points and stuff like that. But the reason why I've actually done them and specifically listed them here in the cost budget is because you have to pay for those tags straight up in advance. So with the application fees, you do the state fees and everything like that, which is $200 to $300, but then you also buy the tag. So when I was applying for, I think it was Barber Ram, as well as so Barbary Rams, like which is Aoudad. Some of you probably know that more familiarly, as well as Ibex, as well as elk, and deer. It was about, plus the license fees and everything like that in the state, the species fees. It was about $4,500 or nearly $5,000 that came off my card, and you've got to pay that in advance. And then what they do is they actually refund you that money. So if just probably a little bit of a note, just because you're going to want to have a bit of cash sitting in your account or your credit card or whatever, and they hold that money for about a month or two before it actually comes back to you, if you're unlucky enough or not lucky enough to draw. I haven't drawn there yet, but obviously if you draw, you only get charged for that tag. This year I think Aiden and I actually only applied for deer and elk, and it was roughly about $2,000 per person Australian for the deer and elk tag, and then same thing, they'll refund you if you don't draw. So that is the section, like, and that's where hunt strategies are really important, just to work out what you're going to be doing, when you're going to be applying, when you want to go on your hunt, and therefore what states to apply in. But as a good rough guide, you're probably looking at $200 to $400 with the yearly fee plus the species fee, depending on how many species you're applying for. Whether you get hunting full on top of that, which we advise, it's about $100 per state. So yeah, if you're applying a couple of states a year, you're going to be looking at sort of that, $1,500, just say. And that obviously you have to apply every year or you lose your points. So that's why hunt strategies are really important. Some hunts you can just go straight onto if it's over the counter. Some hunts take a bit of planning. So that's the first thing to be aware of. The next thing is, once you've actually been successful and drawn the tag, we've just done a rough breakdown of how much these tags actually cost. So Aiden and I, we're going to be chasing, we've got the big game combo, which is a general tag in Montana, which is deer and elk, and that works out to be about $2,000 Australian in 2025. So for a Wyoming non-resident elk tag, that's about $1,100 Australian. Idaho elk tag for non-residents, $1,000. Colorado elk, $1,300. And then generally speaking, like the deer and antelope tags are a bit cheaper. So like Colorado deer is only $850 Australian. Montana is a little bit more expensive at $1,100 Australian. Antelope tags normally fall in the same range as sort of deer. So yeah, that $700 to $1,000, $1,100 range for an antelope tag. So obviously, I would encourage, if you're going over to these places, and another benefit of sort of hunting full is, if you're going over and you really just want to hunt an elk, if you can get a deer tag or an antelope tag in your pocket too, for how much you're going to spend to get over there and car hire and all that type of stuff, plus licensing fees already that you've paid for the application. Like, it's not that much more expensive to just whack an antelope tag or a deer tag in your pocket in case you're like walking around and see one. So yeah, I'd advise, like, especially if this is like a one and done sort of trip, or one every 5 or 10 years, you're probably more likely or would like to get more tags and therefore more bang for your buck in going over there. So yeah, I'd advise sort of stacking as many tags in as possible. But yeah, that gives you sort of a rough guideline. Obviously, elk tags are a bit more expensive, probably $1,000 to $1,500 as a purely elk tag, whereas deer and antelope are going to be a bit cheaper than that, sort of that $700-800 up to $1,100 range. So you've done all the applying and now you are heading out on the hunt. And this is where you really do need to sort of plan what your expectations are and what type of hunt you're going on. So like I said, this podcast is really set up for that DIY hunter, probably a bit of a minimalist, trying to maximize time in the field while stay on a pretty tight budget, I guess, and just spend as many days out there. If you're wanting to do a guided hunt, even for the most basic ones, you're probably looking at, 8 to 10 grand Australian. And obviously then that goes up to an unlimited amount. If you're talking about sheep and moose and those type of things, you're probably more talking about just paying for a hunt rather than, actually getting a tag, even though you can draw tags and then go guided. But yeah, I would encourage you to go back and listen to the species specific ones for a bit more information on those topics, and also just get a rough idea of how much it's going to cost for those guided hunts. What other options I guess you've got is whether you're going to be more for the situation or the picture that I'm painting is if you're going private access versus public versus BLM. So I would go in order, but public is essentially free land. Everyone can go on there. BLM is essentially private property that is rented from, the state government to have hunting access or fishing access. So it's also generally free. And then it goes into private access. So you can get what they call a trespass fee, private access, which, they might be like, it's $200 a day to hunt. And, you camp on here and you can hunt and stuff like that if you've got a tag. It's generally more commonly in like the limited entry spots, but you can also find this in public areas. But generally speaking, a lot of people are selling like guided hunts through their private property. It's pretty rare to find places that will allow a trespassing fee, just because, why would they give someone access for $200 to $300 a day when they can sell a week-long guided hunt with a guide, for just say like that 8 to 10 grand fee that we're talking about. So most of the bigger, better places are all tied up with guides, but not to say that you can't find some private access and pay for that trespassing fee. But once again, this hunt is outlined mainly for that public land hunter or sort of BLM hunter. And yeah, probably trying to spend more time out in the field on a bit of a tighter budget. But yeah, just wanted to sort of discuss all the different options. And yeah, especially if you're going to go guided, then you want to probably have a little bit of a bigger budget.
Born out of necessity, Day 6 designs and builds specialised equipment for hunters. Their arrows are bomb-proof and consistent. I'm currently running their 275 spine shafts. The split between the usual 250 and 300 spine shaft is perfect for the heavier broadhead that we run. Coming in at 11.8 grains per inch, this setup is perfect for all game here in Australia and beyond.
So now the next topic, and I've broken this up into a couple of different time brackets. So looking at 4 to 6 months out, a lot of the draw application results come out sort of through April, May, June. And so really, just say most archery is going to be in September, going into late archery and muzzleloader and stuff, and early rifle in October, and then rifle mainly in November. So really you've got, 4 to 6 months, depending on when the results come out, as to pretty much get your trip organised. If you know you're going to draw, then you can organise it earlier. But generally speaking, you're sort of booking your trips 4 to 6 months out. So in previous experience, so this is taking into account 3 trips of mine to the US now. Generally speaking, flights is a big cost and works out to be about 2.5 to 3 grand. Now, our trip this year for Aiden and I is costing a little bit more, but that's because we've got a couple of flights to get to. On the way there, we're going to be flying Emerald to Brisbane, which is obviously an additional cost. And then on the way home, I've got to fly Sydney to Armidale, and Aiden's got to fly Sydney, Brisbane, and then back to Emerald. So our flights this trip ended up being about 3,300 each, but we've also got a lot of smaller connecting flights within Australia. If you're on the East Coast or live in a major city where you're flying even just say Adelaide to Melbourne or Adelaide to Sydney, or if you're flying, hopefully out of Brisbane, Sydney or Melbourne, generally speaking, in my previous experience, it's worked out about 2.5 grand for your flights. An important thing to note is with these international flights, you obviously book it through from, in our case, it's going to be Emerald all the way through to Bozeman in Montana, but you're only allowed one bag with 31 kilos in it, and you're only allowed 7 kilos of carry-on. Now, excess baggage is very, very, very expensive. And you do hear some horror stories of people getting slapped with very, very big extra additional baggages, fines and stuff like that. A couple of tips that I like to do is the first thing is I like to have my itinerary printed out and with me. On my first trip there, I actually had to pay an additional $300 Australian for my flight from LAX to Bozeman, I believe it was. It was the same airline flight, but because it'd gone from international to domestic, they said that my max bag was only 23 kilos, and because I had one bag with 31 or whatever, they stung me. Whereas having your itinerary there that says the whole way through that it's 31 kilos, it prevents that discussion and argument with some lovely lady or gentleman at a desk somewhere that has something to prove, and you can just say, sorry, ma'am or lady, it's 31 kilos, go and politely leave me alone. So that's definitely a pro tip. The other one, which we'll talk about in the next podcast, where we're going to break down all that gear that we're taking to the US, is having a really good big bow bag. So we use the Hoyt, I think they're called payload roller bags, and yeah, you can well and truly fit all your stuff in there. You can probably fit too much stuff in there, to be honest. Got a heap of little cool compartments and stuff for making sure everything goes in the right spot, as well as a nice deep bag. Really easy. It's on wheels as well, so you're not carrying it everywhere, breaking your arm. It's a great bag. So I recommend one of them, but there is a few different, I think Option has got one as well. And yeah, there's a few different companies now that have those big sort of roller bag, duffel bags for archery gear. but I'd recommend investing in one of them if you're going to start doing some more of these international hunts, whether it be to New Zealand or to the US or Europe or Africa or wherever, because generally speaking, you get one bag with 31 kilo from our experience. So the next big expense is car hire. So the way that it works out for us is because we're going to be doing a lot of like dirt roads and that type of thing, we recommend getting a good four-wheel drive with some good clearance. And honestly speaking, a lot of these guys over there have trucks. And I don't want to speak badly about them, but they think that their trucks are like the best thing in the world. They've always got tubs. But the problem with that is if it rains or if you're like at a trailhead and you've got to leave it for 4 or 5 days, like unless you chuck all your gear inside the truck, which is then, just a dual cab, sort of limited on space, like none of these guys run canopies like what we do here in Australia. We've probably got a few things to teach them about that, but that's the reason why I personally like, something like a 4Runner or those type of cars where it's got an actual boot compartment on it, which just gives you so much more storage. And to be honest, I've a fair bit of the time when I was doing it solo, I'd actually just put the back seat down and enable you to be able to sleep fully, like lying down in the car as well, which was pretty comforting in bear country. Obviously, if you've got a couple of you guys, you're not going to be able to do that. But for a solo run, being able to sleep in the car and like literally just park up, push the seat down, put the pad in there and go to sleep was very comforting and quite an easy way to get around and that type of thing. For a four-wheel drive, what we've found previously, and we recommend in the US using a company called Turo. So rather than using like a Budget or Allianz or any of those ones, Turo is just like an online website essentially where you can say where you're going to. So for us, it was, we want pickup from Bozeman Airport. We want a four-wheel drive, and it gives you all the options. So generally speaking, ours for we're going for 31 days, and it worked out, I think about 3,200 Australian for that time. It was a fair bit cheaper because we booked in advance. As we'll get to, booking earlier obviously means it's going to be cheaper. But also with Turo, if they've got like a 1 month booking, if in advance thing, it does become fairly cheaper just for peace of mind of the owner of the vehicle. Because these are all, with Turo, they're all people that own vehicles that essentially put them up to be hired and rented and driven. Just with that though, a few disclaimers that you need to check and make sure is you need to make sure that they let you go on dirt roads. So some of them don't allow that, especially if they're new trucks and stuff. I mean, you'd hate to have a truck and get it dirty. The next one was checking the insurance on there and stuff. So we just got like a general, they've got 3 different policies generally for the different insurance policies. We just got the general one where I think there was like an excess of $1,000 or $750 or something. That was all US, so obviously a little bit more. And then the other thing to really keep in mind is a lot of these guys have a mile limit on their car. So just depending on how much you plan on driving, they often only have like a 60-mile limit per day. So, I mean, for us, it's not hugely a problem because we're going for 30 days. We got 1,800 miles, which, is a fair bit of driving. And we plan on sort of going from spot to spot and hunting for a fair while, but just depending on the style of hunting you plan on doing, if you plan on moving a lot and sort of hunting from a vehicle, just something to be mindful of. But yeah, so $100 to $150 Australian a day is sort of the ballpark that I've experienced, with renting cars previously. And so it gives you a rough ballpark of, obviously if you're going for 2 weeks at the worst end, you're going to be looking at, what's that, like $2,250 roughly. If you're going for 21 days, you're going to be looking at roughly $3,000. So yeah, just a rough idea on the worst end for car hire. Obviously, if like that's for like not the top of the end, that's not like a 2025 new four-wheel drive, whatever. Like I think our one's like a 2022 or 2021 four-wheel drive. Which is also works for us because obviously it's a bit more beat up, which then they're probably going to see less scratches and stuff. Whereas if you want like a Dodge Ram or something, or like a big truck, some of those were going for 200 plus 300 a day US. So you're going to be spending a fair bit more. But once again, just for the guys that want to go over there and experience it on a pretty good budget, that's a good idea. So another thing to mention would be all the firearms transport paperwork, or potentially renting a firearm once you're over there. To be honest, it's something that I've included in here, not as a cost, but more as a reminder for the gun guys that listen to this podcast. More for that 4 to 6 months out, I'd recommend getting your paperwork sorted. Don't leave it last minute. Anything to do with firearms, especially obviously on our end, with export permits for ammo and license, is obviously going to be a pain in the ass from our government. So make sure that you get all that sorted early. Not sure exactly how much that's going to cost. But don't imagine it being ridiculously expensive either. I did look up, there was options for, especially in a lot of these major Western cities, for local gun shop rentals, for actually renting firearms and stuff over there. So obviously another idea, an alternative for you guys to look at if you just want to save all that paperwork and stuff and transporting a firearm over there. To be able to have just a gun when you get there. Obviously, it's not going to be your gun, so you're not sure about how good the scope is, and making sure you're probably going to want to re-sight it in. But just more making you aware that there is paperwork for getting guns over there, and also other options if you just want to get a gun on the state side. So the next category we jump into is things that you're looking at doing probably 4 to 6 weeks out before the trip. And the big one is a ESTA. So an ESTA is a visa that you need to either enter I got caught here when Nick and I were going to South America to hunt. If you're touching down on US soil, even for a connecting flight of 2 hours, you need a visa. So we didn't have them, so we had to wait a day and get that sorted before you could go to Argentina to hunt. But I've obviously learnt that lesson since, and so every time we go anywhere near the US, we make sure we get this ESTA, and that works out at $200 Australian. They only process them 1 month out. Essentially, it's a very quick fee that you fill out. Application form takes about 10 minutes, is pretty simple to do. So another thing, if you're an archery hunter, it doesn't cost anything, but I've listed it here 4 to 6 weeks out just to make sure you've done it. There's an online archery ed course. Montana's got one. It's a one-off one. I'm not sure about other states. But just make sure you've done all the required hunting permits and that type of thing. The first year I rocked up to go over there, I hadn't done mine, and it was like a 6-hour online test. So here I am sitting in Parks and Wildlife. Lucky my bag wasn't there, so I wasn't wasting hunting time. But if you've only got a small window of, a week to 10 days or whatever to hunt, you'd hate to be sitting in a car park doing this archery ed stuff. So just making sure that all those permits and little nuances, I guess, are done before you get over there. Another one to be sorting 4 to 6 weeks out, if not longer, was the travel insurance. So making sure, preferably, that it does include hunting as a listed activity they accept. Also, if you're someone with a lot of expensive gear, so whether it be optics or camera gear, like us, or a combination of both, making sure that you've listed all your gear, and also probably getting it covered for, well, it depends on the person and how much insurance and excess you want to pay, but getting it covered at appropriate cost to actually get it covered. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have really good sets of binos and stuff that might be a couple of years old, and if they're damaged or broken over there, they're obviously going to do it for market value, which they may only think it's $200 or $300, even though to replace a new set of Swaros, it's going to be a couple of grand. So just making sure you select and take the time to pick the correct travel insurance and the level of excess and cover that you guys want for your gear, hopefully making sure it includes hunting. But that's going to be looking at roughly $300 to $500 per person. So obviously recommend getting it, especially even if it's not for your gear, mainly for the medical. Obviously, if you get ripped up or something over there, have a car accident, it is very expensive over there, and they have zero healthcare in the US. So that's going to be the big one. But if you want to get gear covered as well, I'd probably recommend it. We all know that when it comes to great tasting coffee in the outdoors, you look no further than Dog and Gun Coffee. Their preloaded drip filters are renowned for taking cafe-grade coffee into your hunting camp. But your favourite flavours can also be enjoyed at home with their whole bean variety. Use code TWIN10, that is TWIN, 10 the number, to get $10 off your first order. So the next category is the expenses that I've written down for once we're over there. So the way that I find that I'm the most comfortable hunting wise and generally how it works is I most of the time, I've got friends over there, so I don't have to use accommodation all the time. If I'm in Bozeman, there's people's places that I can crash at now, which is a huge luxury that I'm very appreciative of. But generally speaking, the first night that you get in, you're probably going to need some accommodation wherever you've flown into. Just to give you time to go for a shop, go to a Bass Pro or a Cabela's or something like that and sort a heap of gear, get some dehydrated meals. You're going to need to pick up the vehicle, whether you're meeting a guide or whatever. But yeah, so the first night you're going to need accommodation, and generally speaking, the last night you're going to need accommodation just to clean gear, before you come back to Australia and New Zealand or wherever you're going, so you don't get pulled up by, border force. And yeah, essentially like, why is your shit all covered in blood, hopefully, or just covered in vegetation, dirt, all that type of thing. So just doing your due diligence there for biosecurity. And then within the trip, I generally find that roughly about every 4 to 5 days, I like to go and hit a hotel or motel. When I was doing it solo, I found that was a pretty good time for, you go out to the backcountry or wherever you're hunting, hunt for 4 or 5 days. And by that time, all your power banks are gone. You've pretty much run out of food, generally speaking, because a lot of the time you've just got eskies for refrigeration. So by then the ice has run out. You've sort of gone through all your dehydrated meals and stuff. By then you're pretty much looking forward to a shower and a nice good night's sleep, as well as charging all your gear and sort of recharging yourself. And so looking at a 2-week trip, you're going to need to go about 4 or 5 times, and it's quite expensive with the exchange rate over there. Most of the time I've found, like even in remote areas, the cost of a motel is sort of $150 US. So I've pretty much put it in as most of the time it's like $200 to $300 Australian per night over there. There's no really, not that I've found anyway. I'm sure there's going to be people that reach out and say, oh, that's not true. But I haven't found any like backcountry dives where it's like $50 a night or whatever, like what you can find here in Australia, where you just find some pub that, has a pretty dodgy single bed and cockroaches running across the floor, for $30 to $50. That doesn't really exist from my experience in the US. But yeah, so roughly $200 to $300 a night there. The next category, once you're over there, is going to be fuel for your truck. So I've sort of put that at $100 to $200 a week Australian. And that's just from my experience with, most of the time you're sort of flying into somewhere that's fairly close, I'd say within 2 to 3 hours of driving, of where you're going to be hunting and mainly situated. If you plan on just absolutely covering the state, obviously you're going to burn a heap more fuel, but generally speaking, with the type of hunt that we're sort of outlining here, it's going to be like drive somewhere that might be a couple of hours from the main airport that you've flown into, hunt for a couple of days, probably go and, you might, if you're on elk or muleys or antelope, whatever, you might, go to the next closest town, which is an hour away, refuel, maybe spend a night, drive back out there, or maybe check another spot that's another hour away somewhere else. Do a couple more days, or you might be hunting, from a vehicle, but it's not like, even if you're hunting from a vehicle, it's not like, you're going to be going fairly slowly, even if you're hunting antelope or whatever, and, glassing from a vehicle, it's not like you're going to be doing, 300 Ks a day or anything like that. Like you're going to be pretty sort of, in one spot, I guess. So I've got $100 to $200 a week there, which is sort of from my previous experience, where a lot of the time you're doing, boot work to try and find the animals rather than, burning tires. So yeah, that's just a rough guide, but obviously take that as a grain of salt, depending on how much you think you're going to be driving around on your potential hunt. So I should note here that the next expense that I would probably say would be food. But I personally have never listed food as an expense on a hunting trip, just because I think it's a bit ridiculous. Because you've got to eat no matter where you are. So like, even if you're sitting here in Australia at your desk, being miserable, thinking about loving to go to the US, or, in your garage or whatever, doing something, shooting arrows, like you're going to need to have breakfast, lunch and dinner, and, maybe the odd snack and coffee and stuff. So, whether you're in Australia or the US, it may be slightly more expensive in the US, but I haven't really listed food as an expense for this one. What I have done though is listed equipment, of which I've listed about $200 a week on, and this is assuming that you're fairly well kitted out with all the needs and supplies, like you've bought all your gear to go hunting over there. Like generally I do buy a little bit more when I'm over there. Like this time I'm going to go and buy a binocular attachment for my tripod, which might be a couple $100 and so on and so forth. But I'm, not anticipating to spend thousands and thousands of dollars of, sleeping bags and tents and stuff. Like I'm assuming I've pretty much got all of that before I go on the trip. So when I talk about equipment, it's talking about mainly things like gas, bear spray if you're in bear country, but also included in that, I've actually included like dehydrated meals, which are about $20 a meal. So, sort of $100, like most of the time you'd say lunch is going to be a dehydrated meal if you're hunting from a truck, or, one dehydrated meal a day, which is more than what you'd be spending on food, just say here in Australia or New Zealand. So I have included about $200 worth of sort of a camping equipment, that type of thing. And then additionally to that equipment one, I guess I've also thrown in just for a whole trip, $1,000 budget, I guess, of unexpected issues, where that may be that you pop a tire and need to get that fixed. It might be $300. You may need to, go and spend an extra night in a motel room somewhere, or, whatever, like your bag gets lost. So I've just thrown in $100 of unforeseen expenses that are going to definitely pop up on the trip. Things that you can't, plan or take into account, but obviously an expense nonetheless. So what I've done now is then gone into what it would look like to go and hunt, an elk, a muley, or an antelope, or a whitetail or something like that in the Western states for a 2 weeks trip for, most Australian or New Zealand hunters. And I've done that and then broken it down. And to be honest, this is, I've tried to be super, super realistic, and I've tried to actually make this a bit higher. Like of all the things that I've listed, generally speaking, if there's a range, I've tried to put it on the higher side. So, so for the yearly fees, so before we even get there, I've included that, which we said was $500 to $1,500, so $1,500. Then for a license or the tags themselves, I've said $2,000 there. So return flights to Australia, I've put them in as $2,500, even though I said it was $2,500 to $300, just because I figure, that's, like I said, from previous experience, most of the guys that are coming from the East Coast or a major city, it's a fair bit less expensive, and you don't have to do all those little connecting flights to rural communities in Australia where we live. I've then done car hire at $150 a day, even though ours was only $100, and that's for 2 weeks. So it worked out to be, roughly $2,250. A hotel 1 night per week plus one at the end and one at the start. So there's $1,500 there. Fuel, $200 a week for 2 weeks. And then we've got equipment, like I said, the dehydrated meals, the gas, those type of things, bear spray, $200 a week. So there's $400 plus the $1,000 extra for the trip. And also I had $500 for travel insurance. So I got a total of $12,750. So, for your application fees, for that year, obviously not including the years before, if you have to spend $1,000 to get the tag. But yeah, application fees, the tag itself, flights over there, car hire for 2 weeks, couple of a couple of nights in a motel room, fuel, food, equipment, plus $1,000 of just, unforeseen expenses where shit hit the fan. You're looking at $12,750, which I think's a pretty good ballpark for, that 2 week trip. Ours actually, for Aiden and I, a lot of these expenses that I've listed, like the tag, the yearly expenses, the return flights. So those are all pretty, the top end really of what you're paying. Really, when it comes down to the bottom end, extending a trip by another 2 weeks, for example, if we took, really the biggest expense is the car hire, and potentially motel rooms, food, fuel, extra stuff like that. But it's like, really, it's not that more to go for 3 weeks or 4 weeks. But a big important thing to note, which is similar, is if you bring a mate or a couple of mates. So just say there's 2 of you on this trip. what I've done is broken it down where if there's actually two of you on a trip, so you obviously both have to have your yearly fees, application fees. You both have to have a tag, or one of you have to have a tag, hopefully to go over and actually go hunting. And then the second thing was your flights. Obviously, you both got flights, but the rental car fees are 50%. You've got it. Hopefully, you're comfortable enough to share a hotel room with your mate. For a couple of nights. So those fees are in half. Your fuel's in half. I've said the extra additional, shit hitting the fan costs of $1,000, they're in half. And so what it actually works out for me was if you bring a mate for those 2 weeks and you both got tags and you're hunting, it actually was $9,975. So that was, half costs for the motel fees, rental car, fuel, and 50% on the extras fees where pop tires or whatever, and all of a sudden, it becomes at less than 10 grand for a 2-week trip with a mate. I know there's a lot of guys on here that probably, if they spent less time at the pub and the pokies, they could probably afford a trip like this every year. But I think it does really put it in perspective that to go and have these awesome trips, it does probably require a little bit of organization, but not a crazy amount. And also, it doesn't necessarily have to blow the budget, is what we're really trying to get across with this podcast. So the average blue collar Australian, worker can definitely well and truly, with every couple of years at least, go and do one of these trips to the US and have an awesome time hunting it. Maybe just antelope or mule deer or whitetail or elk. Hopefully that paints a pretty good idea for you guys on what it roughly costs. Obviously, if you're going to go for longer, even with a mate, it's going to cost slightly more. But if you go over there for a month, it's going to be a bloody long time and an awesome trip, and something you'll probably remember for the rest of your life. And we're probably only talking about a couple more grand to go for a couple more weeks. So just something to keep in mind. I guess a few closing thoughts was really be organized is probably the big one. And obviously the earlier you organize and book the flights, earlier you book the car hire, all those type of things, even motel rooms and stuff like that, everything like that, the more organized you are on a trip like this, generally speaking, the less it costs. And the second thing is having friends over there. Obviously for us now, we've got some really great friends, but if you don't directly have friends over there, Hunting Fool is going to be your best friend and an awesome resource. So whether it comes down to organizing the hunt or even developing a hunt strategy, they're not only going to get you more tags, but I honestly think they're probably going to save you money and time as well. They're going to give you, you draw a general tag and they're going to say, hey, these are some spots that you can go and check out. So, that's going to save you time. It's also going to help you, you're going to fly into the right airport. They might even help you with gear or, who to go and hunt with and stuff like that, depending on, how much help and assistance you guys want. So, definitely someone that we hold in very high regard to with helping set up our hunts and stuff like that. And especially if you don't really have that much of an idea once it comes to hunting over there, definitely someone that we would recommend talking to. The other thing as well, post-hunt, that we didn't include in the initial hunt itself was, and that is just getting your, hopefully, trophies home. So, this is something that I've broken up as a second feature, just more in the sense that it's a cost that I guess is incurred after the trip, and you can sort of save up again, I guess, or even have it in the initial budget if you want. But there's a couple of different things for getting your trophies home. So the first one, which is obviously going to be probably the easiest in some ways, but definitely the most cost effective, is you can actually take your trophies home on the flight with you. So making sure that you've taken them to a taxidermist to get them all prepared, whether it be the cape tanned or whether it be, skulls zeroed and boiled and that type of thing, but making sure everything's prepared for you to come back to Australia is going to be a big one. And then obviously, bringing it on the flight home with you. So paying for extra baggage is going to be an option. It is going to be more expensive, but it's probably the cheaper option out of getting someone, like an importer and exporter involved with getting your trophies home. So when it comes to that, it's a huge process, and it does cost a little bit more. But looking at getting a couple of elk, just say you get an elk head and a deer head, maybe an antelope skull back. They all sort of work in together, but they're all separate as well. So what you're going to need is you're going to need an exporter in the US. they're going to need to get the taxidermist or whoever's got your head. And you can obviously get it mounted over there, but once it's in a full mount, it's a much bigger box. So that's going to cost a lot more money. So I'd probably encourage you to get it done here in Australia or New Zealand. But yeah, looking at getting your head and potential capes and stuff home, the taxidermist is going to need to clean them and get the required paperwork. They're going to need to get that to an exporter. So that exporter then exports it, and there's going to be a whole heap of custom fees and border security fees and stuff like that. And then there will also be import fees for an importer. So with all of that, and talking to a couple of friends, I couldn't talk to some importers and exporters directly, but just talking to a couple of friends that have had and gone through this process themselves, you'd probably be looking about $2,000 to $4,000. Obviously, depending on how much it weighs, how big it is. Like obviously, it's going to be a lot more for a massive 350-inch elk than it is going to be for a mule deer or an antelope or something like that. Like if it's just one skull or some casties or something, that's where I'd honestly recommend probably trying to get it in your suitcase and brought back to Australia first, rather than just getting an exporter to send it over for you. So, but once again, make sure you've got all the paperwork and everything lined up. Like you don't want to just rock up with an antelope skull with meat still hanging off it. Like I guarantee you are not going to get that into the country. So, going and making sure that you've got all the correct paperwork, whether it be you're exporting it through someone and importing it, or just bringing it through in your bag. But yeah, $2,000 to $4,000 I've got for getting your trophies home. It's another little sting in there, and something I haven't really included in the costs yet, just because I haven't actually, I've done plenty of these hunts now and been successful on them, but I've just been lucky enough to have one of my the against all odd bull, his cape and skull is actually still at the taxidermist, and then another one's just at my mate's place, the first bull that I got, which I'll probably, hopefully, if Aiden and I are successful this trip, look at getting a big container and getting all that sent home at some stage, which, having a couple of elk hopefully in there, it does make it cheaper if you cut the antlers down, where you can do a cut essentially like in the shape of a sort of Z, where you can then reattach them. But obviously that shrinks the antlers down significantly. So something to keep in mind, and something that taxidermists and that type of thing can obviously do for you and probably very aware of. So but a rough guideline, $2,000 to $4,000 for getting your trophies home.
I have personally been using Hoyt bows for over 20 years now, building the most innovative and technological advanced gear. Their carbon bows are the lightest, leanest, and ultra compact on the market. Quite frankly, I treat mine like hell, throwing it around, banging it on rocks and scrub. Time and time again, it has performed when I've needed it the most. Get serious, get Hoyt.
Well, hopefully, guys, you've got a awesome breakdown now of how much a trip like this costs. Hopefully, it's taken a bit of the sting out of it, and also become a bit less intimidating for a few of you guys to, become inspired and organize your own trips, take action, and start planning. It does take, generally speaking, a good 12 months, if not a couple of years, to organizing successfully, carry out a trip like this. So, hopefully it's inspired a few guys to take action and start organising some things for, getting your applications in, or just looking at and thinking about potentially when you want to go on the trip even, and also maybe just start putting a little bit of money away. When you don't go to the pub or go to the pokies or whatever, and put $50 here, $50 there into a little account that you call shooting my big elk or whatever. But hopefully, you guys have got a good idea now of how much it roughly costs to go on a trip. What we're going to do is jump into our FAQ section. So if you guys have a frequently asked question, please email us at info@twinelements.com.au with the subject line FAQ, or send us a message at Twin Elements, Aiden Doumtsis Outdoors, or James Doumtsis Outdoors on Instagram, and we will answer that question in a future podcast episode. So this week's question is sent in from Benji off Instagram. So he said, "Hey mate, wondering if I could ask you advice on making mince. When you make your mince, do you trim off completely all the silver side / sinew off the meat so it's completely clean?" Thanks, mate, for sending this one in. Also very relevant topic. So Aiden and I just grabbed some Carnivore Collective minces, which were a massive upgrade from our little home jobs that we've had previously. A lot of people I hear use like KitchenAids and those type of things. Minces are one of these things that are not built all the same. So if you've got a KitchenMaid or those type of things, or like a little mincer. We had one for ages, and to be honest, Benji, we did have to. It was quite a process making mince, so we had to completely clean all the silver side off, anything that looked like connective tissue or like that. We had to really, really trim it. With the new Carnivore Collective minces that we've got, they're 1 horsepower, can do about 250 kilos an hour. It honestly has just made mincing a breeze in the sense that, the prep time is so much less, because instead of having to trim it into tiny little cubes like the size of a golf ball, and you've got to make sure the sinew and everything like that's off, what we could actually do was pretty much cut whole muscle groups in half or just leave them whole. And what I actually did was mince it, and then we would even re-mince it with a finer mince. And doing that not only produced a very high quality mince, a lot better than my other one where didn't have like little bits of gristle and sort of sinew and stuff, even though it used to take me probably an hour to prep 2 back legs, whereas the other day I did 8 deers worth of back legs, so 16 back legs. Took me about 2 hours to not only clean but also mince and re-mince and then bag, just purely because of how quick you can actually mince these legs. These are fallow deer I'm talking about here. And also just purely because you don't have to spend that much time trimming and cleaning and stuff. So for me, it was just a huge eye-opener on the advances, and also just having good gear. And even though if you only think you're doing 1 or 2 deer a year, I would recommend sort of investing and getting one of these minces, purely because you get to utilize so much more of the animal. Like we were hardly trimming anything just because it could like chew through that sinew, and the end product and end result was a lot better. Another thing to talk about when you're doing venison mince specifically, obviously if you're doing like goat mince, it has a little bit of fat in there. If you're doing pork mince, it definitely has plenty of fat generally, so that's fine. But with venison mince, what you can do if you just want a general grind for, bolognese burgers, that type of thing, I generally add in 10% of either pork fat or beef fat. I generally try and stick away from all the deer intramuscular fat, or any fat even on the top of the back strap or anything like that, just purely because once it's in there, it does give a very waxy feel in your mouth once it's heated up. Generally speaking, really, really try and stick away from the deer fat. I'll pretty much trim it out. I'm not keeping any of that in there. If I have some, or if I'm so desired, I will add in beef fat or pork fat to just give it a little bit of fat. But most of the time, if you're doing things like bolognese or that type of thing, you're adding liquid, and so it's not a huge requirement, but definitely it does add to the eating experience if you do add in a little bit of fat. So recommend that at about 10%. Well, that wraps up this week's podcast. As you're hearing this, like I said, depending on the day, we are either on a plane heading to the US or already there. So you may be checking out our stories online, and hopefully we're getting amongst plenty of action. We've got 6 tags between Aiden and I. Once we touch down, we've got, both got elk, both got deer, and both got antelope. So hopefully we can get plenty of opportunities over there, and we can make the most of it, get some awesome content and filming for you guys. This is the first of a couple of episodes that are sort of more US based. The next one that you're going to listen to next week will be talking about all the gear that we're taking over there. And then as well as a few FAQs in the one following that. As a listener of this podcast, we would just like to reward you guys for supporting us here at Twin Elements. So what we've done is gone and set up a unique 10% discount code for our prints on our website. We've got 40 prints there, which we're constantly upgrading. So there's wildlife ones, there's Northern Territory ones with water buffalo, birds, that type of thing. There's the deer species, the 6 deer species in Australia. And we've also got some US stuff, some elk stuff over there as well as just beautiful landscape shots. So if you want to get one for yourself, or a loved one, or family member, we've developed a code that has 10% off for you guys, and that is the Twin Elements podcast. So that will get you 10% off on your order. And once again, we just thank you for supporting us here at Twin Elements. It does mean the world to us. Lastly, if you guys can please remember to subscribe, review, and rate the podcast, as well as our other multiple online presence, whether that be on Instagram or on our YouTube channel. Please, follow along or subscribe just to stay with all the action. Once we get back from the US, we have a heap more stuff dropping on our YouTube channel. So I'm not going to ruin the surprise and say what it is, but it involves more elk and more red deer. So definitely what you guys are going to want to see. But we're looking at becoming a lot more regular on YouTube. So make sure you jump on and subscribe over there. We've got a heap of content coming out in the next couple of months, including obviously this big trip that we're about to go on or already on at the moment. So make sure to subscribe on the YouTube. But once again, I hope you guys took a lot out of this podcast. Hopefully it gives you a great idea of what it's going to cost for you to go and experience the beautiful US and have an awesome hunt over there. So thank you for supporting the podcast, and hopefully you got a lot from this one. And we'll catch you guys next time on the Twin Elements podcast. Bye, guys.